Hello, and welcome back to History Videos for Kids. Today, we are going to be talking about the Plains Wars and the Battle of Little Bighorn. In the 1800s, many families were struggling to make ends meet. Many of these families had heard about starting over in the western states of America. Several pioneer families decided to take their chances and set out on a journey that would hopefully result in a life with a fresh start. A lot of people went on the same trail to the state of Oregon, so that it eventually was called the Oregon Trail. To this day, you can still see wagon wheel marks on the trail because so many families had taken that route. Like anything in life, fulfilled dreams and hopes can require hard times, work, and dedication. That is just what this long, tedious trip would require of all the families that set out on this journey. You see, this was not an easy trail to travel. In fact, it was a very difficult one. By the end of the day, many people would have scars, bruises, blisters, and splinters on their feet because they did not have shoes. Stories were told about how some people got large bruises from hail that had fallen on them. Others had contracted deadly diseases. And some had even been struck by lightning. Families that had lost a loved one would bury their dead by the side of the road. After mourning their dead for a few hours, they continued to keep going. Who knows just how many bodies lay on the sides of what is left of the Oregon Trail. The lifestyle these pioneers led was not an easy one. Every morning, they would get a nice hot fire going, because without the fire, they would not have any breakfast. As they continued west, sticks and branches became harder and harder to find. Eventually, the pioneers turned to buffalo poop, or dung, to start their fires. That probably smelled really nice, right? And sometimes they didn't even have that, and so they had no choice but to eat the carcasses of the dead animals raw. This long, hard journey took 6 months. Even with this long journey looming over the pioneers' heads, many Americans still decided to do it. One of the main reasons so many people were going west was because it was really difficult to get a job in the city because so many people lived there. In fact, it was so urgent that the U.S. government officials actually went on the journey with the pioneers to help them settle and divide the land. If a territory reached a population of 60,000 people or more, then they could request to become a state. In 1846, the first Western territory to become a state was Iowa. 66 years later, the last of the 48 coterminous states was Arizona. Now, doesn't this all sound great? The Wild West was getting settled. People were finally having a place they could call home, and more territories were becoming states. The only problem was that Native Americans had been dwelling in these lands long before the pioneers had settled there. In fact, many of the new states' names were Native American words. The Native Americans were fairly nice to the new settlers, but as the population grew, they began to feel less enthusiasm towards them. They felt as if their homeland was being invaded. So, they decided to take a stand, and they began to defend the land on which they dwelt. The American government responded by sending an army to fight the Native Americans. Many of these tiny battles took place all throughout the West. The Native Americans fought hard, but they were eventually forced to leave. The U.S. government took portions of the land and called them reservations. These reservations were the only places the Native Americans were allowed to stay. They did not appreciate this, and so they once again began to push back. One Native American chief, named Crazy Horse, refused to leave the land. They would not give in and dwell on the reservations. A man named George Custer, who had previously fought in the Civil War, demanded that Crazy Horse and his tribe leave. Custer, however, did not know that many Native Americans had responded to Crazy Horse's call for help. About 4,000 Native Americans were prepared to fight. Custer only had about 700 men. Custer and his men died in the Battle of Little Bighorn because of this. This is known as Custer's Last Stand. There is a memorial called the Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument in Montana, which seeks to honor both sides of the battle. Another Native American named Geronimo escaped one of the reservations with his band of Native Americans. They lived outside of the reservations for a whole year. They fought many little battles against American soldiers. Eventually, he was captured and he died, never to lay eyes on his home again. The Native Americans were no longer in charge of the land. Instead, the land now belonged to the American settlers and people from all over the world. America was growing bigger and bigger. The American West would never be the same. Well, that wraps up our history lesson. See you next time.